Christophe, you moderated this morning the session on SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. What's your conclusion?
Well, the sense we got from the participants is very clearly that SMEs are indeed an engine for recovery. And contrary to what one could think, they are not begging for a lot more money. They are mainly asking for faster procedures for the disbursement of funds which are available and cutting red tape, letting SMEs innovate and creating jobs rather than adding regulations and regulations.
What concrete advice came out of the session?
Well, I asked each of the panelists to give one single recommendation to policymakers at the end, and indeed they were quite specific. Francoise, the Deputy Director General of DG Enterprise, said, never give up. And indeed last year she was talking about implementation of the Small Business Act, and this is still the challenge, to implement the Small Business Act. Then we had Hugh Williams, who is one of the Vice Presidents of Business Europe in charge of SMEs, and his big recommendation was to strengthen the IP, the intellectual property protection, also so that SMEs can use it as an asset in their balance sheet and therefore as a security to get more loans. Then we had Christian Mandl. He's the founder of Sky Europe, which was a great airline in Central Europe, which went bankrupt, mainly for financial reasons. He did not dwell only on that, and his big recommendation was to facilitate moving over from entrepreneur to employee and from employee to entrepreneur, to increase the pool of potential entrepreneurs. Then we had Richard Pelly, the president of the European Investment Fund, which is connected to the European Investment Bank. And his big thing, really answering the requests from the room, is to speed up the procedures. Speeding up the procedures for accessing public funds can also help SMEs to leverage this and get additional private sector funds. So these were the main recommendations on there was one more speaker who advised to speed up the inclusion of business knowledge in R&D projects in order to facilitate innovating products and therefore growth.
You yourself are an entrepreneur as well. You set up EurActiv 11 years ago. How do you feel about the climate for small and medium-sized companies in Europe?
Well, we are doing okay in the crisis. We don't need additional finance. But as an entrepreneur, I do have my own viewpoints. Contrary to the panelists, I do think that the volume of finance available makes a difference. I'm surprised by the hundreds of billions which have been spent on bailing out banks compared to the tens of millions of euros or hundreds of millions of euros which are spent on SMEs and which are spent very slowly. Second point is the speed of procedure. Why does it take 1 week to bail out a big bank and 6 months or 12 months to accept a loan from an SME? This is not threatening the balance sheet of the state. Why does it take longer? And my final point really is that we miss the overall policy framework in order to guide the policy makers. We had in the last 10 years the Lisbon agenda. It has failed to some extent at national level in terms of implementation. We are replacing it by Europe 2020. Very few people know about it. There has been very little communication so far, even less involvement of national stakeholders for the Lisbon agenda, so it does not look good at all. I would strengthen Europe 2020 by focusing on one overarching concept, and that's innovation. Under innovation, you can regroup cutting red tape, speeding up the procedures, facilitating the transfer from R&D to innovative products, and also modernizing the social relations, the HR aspects. And doing these 4 things under the umbrella of innovation would make a real difference for SMEs.
The theme of the European Business Summit this year is putting Europe back on track. Do you feel that that is happening?
The economy is picking up. There were good figures regarding the industrial production. The risk is that we are complacent and that we are satisfied with being back where we were 2 years ago. But the rest of the world is not waiting. It's not enough to just go back to where we were. Back on track is actually not my recommendation. What we need is to find a new track for growth, and that's why I would focus not only on the short-term issues, but on providing a good and innovative regulatory framework for SMEs, because people don't invest with a 6-month horizon depending on the interest rates and the euro exchange rate. That's really not the focus of entrepreneurs. What they need is a vision for the next 5 or 10 years, and for the moment, Europe 2020 is not providing that.
Christophe, thanks.